Alright guys, this is going to be our BB weight video. So in this video we're going to explain what types of BBs may be better for indoor play versus outdoor play versus your barrel length and some of the different factors you got to consider when looking at BBs. So first we're going to explain heavy versus light BBs. So a lot of people, they like to use the light BBs, like for example the .20s over here, because for one, they're really cheap, and for two, you can buy them at pretty much every place. Everyone's going to have 20s and below. We don't really like to use them just because they are light, and the lighter the BB is, the more it's going to float around in the air and the more it's going to be affected by the wind. So 20s, I would say these we would generally stray away from. We like to use the heavier weight BBs, and the heavier weight BBs are good because for one, they're obviously heavier, so in the air they're not going to be as affected by the wind, and they're a little bit more expensive. One of the downsides with heavy BBs is that since they are heavier, you're going to get less FPS out of them. So your gun's FPS may actually drop, but the effective range might increase. Because remember, FPS doesn't necessarily mean range. If you can shoot 400 FPS, but your range is only 200 feet because the BB, after 200 feet, it breaks off, you might want to switch to a heavier BB and maybe shoot 375, but have a 300-foot range instead, because the BB has a more consistent travel path. So for the 20s, we just have an example here. This is the Valken Tactical Airsoft BBs. If you're going with this low of a BB weight, it doesn't really matter what brand that you get, because all of them are pretty much going to fly the same. So pretty much just get the cheapest one you can buy, and then just use them at your local CQB field or something. Just make sure you don't use them outdoors, because they're not going to perform that well.
So as far as 25s go, in my opinion, 25s is the lightest BB you should be using. They should be indoor only BBs, and you should be using them in kind of like a gun like this that shoots soft. It shoots like only 350 or 340. So in this gun we only really use it indoor, so I'd use only 25s or 28s in this gun. It's just 25s is just too light of a BB to be using outdoor. The wind affects it too much. But for indoor it's good because it's still 0.05 heavier than 20s, and it doesn't drop your FPS that much. Alright, so next up we have 28s. This is like kind of what most people would use in outdoor settings. This is the lightest BB I would use in any outdoor field. I've been using it on my Arcturus AK, which shoots like 440 with 25s, but I've been noticing 28s, it's just not heavy enough for this, and I know this setup because it has one thing for AGs to determine what BB you should be using is you have to determine your volume ratio, which there's other videos on how to do that. But you basically takes into account your barrel width, your cylinder width, and stuff like cylinder dimensions, stuff like that, to determine what the maximum weight would be to make it so you have the highest amount of joules. But you don't really have to do that. You can kind of just feel it out. And I know this gun can handle more than 28, so I'm going to move up next time I play to 32s. And I think that's still going to be too light, so I'm going to move up past there to 36s. But as far as 28s go, it's like the lightest you should use in outdoor setting. But it doesn't get affected by the wind too much, but you definitely probably want to use at least 30s, which would be in between here. 30s is a good weight for outdoor play.
Alright, so next up is 32s. So 32s is what I usually use for outdoor or indoor. When I'm using this is my PolarStar 4CRL. I use those because I do have a flat hop. I used to have a flat hop system. Now I have an R hop system in it. And I do run quite a bit of air volume. Also, they're heavier, so they fly better in the air, less affected by wind. I'm not too concerned with the drop in FPS because I can always adjust using the PolarStar system. With AEGs, if you're using 32s, you just want to make sure you got a decent high power setup, that you're shooting at least 400 with 25s. But it is a good option for outdoor because 32s are decently cost effective. You can find them at most fields, and obviously they're going to fly a lot better and perform for you. That might get the extra 100 feet of range by using 32s instead of 28s.
And another thing is, guys, like if you use these 32s in indoor, you're gonna find that people call their hits real quick because there's a lot more joules behind it. Like if you're shooting harder with these BBs than with 20s, it hurts a lot more.
All right, and lastly, we have 48s. So 48s are pretty much the highest BB that I've tried weight wise in this gun for the PolarStar, and those are perfect for acting as a DMR, getting those really long range shots out past like I would say 400 feet. Still consistent, still accurate. Even in decent wind conditions, they're pretty accurate. And pretty much when you're using a setup with either a dialed in setup with 32s or 48s, you're going to actually find that the gun performs better than a gun that shoots sim rounds. And we've tried that. Sim round guns actually are not as accurate as airsoft guns. And if you're using this for like a training or simulation purpose, 48s are good. People really call their hits, especially if the training you're going to doesn't have an FPS limit. And the one downside I found with this is the price of it. So this only holds about 1,500 rounds, and it costs about $32 for just that. So I guess if you're coming over from paintball, that might not be too costly for you because you're used to paying a lot more when it comes to buying paint. But for a lot of airsofters, it's just not worth that money to be putting in just to buy those BBs. But if you are looking for those long range shots, I would say that it is worth it. Anything above 48s, I would say only use it in bolt action snipers, because if you have a setup like this where it's semi-auto, you're going to blow through, I would say, one of these if you have a good day. So even with mid caps, you do use a lot, and then you're spending more money on BBs than anything else. So, but if you do cost saving measures such as filling your own air tanks, like we have a video on that, how to fill your own PolarStar air tanks, you can carry some of that money over, maybe get yourself some better BBs from the money that you save. But all in all, it's going to be up to you on which BB weight you pick. Like we said, just I would say higher than 28s, so somewhere between 28s and 48s, I would say, for field play. If you do a lot of CQB, then feel free to get lower weights than that. But if you're going to a milsim event, you want to have at least 28s just to get those long range shots. And obviously just make sure you have a good hop up setup, maybe even a flat hop or an R hop, just to maximize that range. Have a decent length barrel, at least 400 millimeters. And but the bottom line is the choice is yours. So we hope this video helped you out, and we'll see you in the next video.
If you guys have questions or want to know what BBs you would recommend for your gun, you can always drop a comment with what your gun is, how hard it shoots with what BBs, and if you play indoor or outdoor, and we could give you a good idea of what BBs you should be using.